Hey guys, it's Friday and I have started on something new. So I wasn't sure how I was going to manage this, and I have not heard back from the board yet about Adobe software. So I don't know if that's going to happen or when, if it does happen. So proactively, I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do instead. And so this is what I would be teaching you right now. We would be doing. I was going to do game design, but I think if I can, I'm going to try and do code first because it makes the most sense. It's how the site was structured. I'm going to try and do the same thing as much as possible. The issue is we don't have access to Flash, but I think I've maybe found a solution that might work. And so you guys have probably heard of Hour of Code, which is a thing that happens every year. That's done by code.org, and there are a lot of platforms that we can work with where we can learn a lot of the same things that we would have learned using Flash. It's going to be slightly different in that it's not coding per se. It is more problem solving, but we'll see how it goes. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna get you to do is I'm gonna set this up in Google Classroom. It'll be here. I'll launch this as soon as I have that content for you. You're gonna be doing this, okay? So I'm gonna set you guys up in my class. I've set up a class with this code. It's all done through Google, or at least the part that I'm doing is done through Google. So you're gonna follow these instructions, okay? And I'll put all this in Google Classroom. Okay, you're going to go to this link, then you're going to sign in. You have to say that you're a student. You're going to be given a class code, which I'll give you. And then once you enter that, it'll walk you through, I think it'll take you to my classroom, which will show you like the tutorials that we're going to be doing. Okay, so let me do that. And I'm just going to basically copy this. And I'm going to put it in here. Okay, and I'll send that off in a minute. Okay. Now, let me just show you what we're going to be doing and how it looks. Um, it's this thing here. Okay, so this is called Scratch. Now, if any of you have ever, some of you maybe done something like this before, and if you have, awesome. And if not, something new. Okay, and I think what should happen is you should get taken to this page. If not, let me know and I'll see what it is that's supposed to happen. Um, let's find out together. All right. Now the other thing that's going to be new is that I don't know this. This is new to me. I learned this yesterday, and I've only gone through some tutorials. So I'm going to be trying to do as much as possible based on my old website. Where is it? Here. No, here. Okay. So I'm going to be taking these tutorials and trying to teach you the same things using that other software, which I don't know yet. So it's going to be some challenges. Anyways, we're going to learn today X position, Y position, rotation, and maybe some mathematical position changes. That's what we're working on, okay? That's the content for this. Let's see how it goes. That, Scratch, not this one, this one. Okay, so this is Scratch. Now the interface is going to be new. I think when you open it up, you should get something like this. Here's where you need to know. There is a list of menu items along here. Okay, so you can see I'm clicking on these little icons here, and they take me down to a bunch of pre-written code blocks. And we've also got a character here. This is called Scratch Cat, I think his name is. Okay, it's a sprite, and a sprite is basically like a little character. Okay, I'm gonna move this full screen. Okay, and by default, I think he shows up in your window. Okay, now down here, I can choose more sprites if I wanted to. I just go down and I pick whichever one I want. Okay, and say I click on this guy here, he shows up in my list, and then now he's on my stage. So I've got Scratch Cat, and I've got this dinosaur. Okay, notice that when I click on each of these guys, if I double click, it shows up here. If I double click, it shows up here, meaning that I'm editing which one of these things I'm editing. It shows up here. Okay, now let's get rid of this. We don't need this guy for now. All right, so here's our cat, okay, and then here are a bunch of icons on the left. We've got motion and looks and sound and events and control and whatever. There's a bunch of stuff. Let's start out first with motion, okay? Now, because I've only got one character here, and this icon here says that I'm working on that particular sprite, I can add some content. So let's go, I'm going to grab a block. I'm going to say move 10 steps. I'm going to drag it right onto here. What happens is this is now applied to this guy here. So if I click this, watch what happens to our cat in our stage here. click it, and it moves 10 steps over. I'll do it again. Every time I click on this thing, it does that. I can move back over here and click it again, and it keeps doing that. I can also change this to say maybe 25, and now when I click it, it's going to move further. Okay, and every time I change this to a bigger number, it'll go further. Okay, that makes sense. And all that's happening is it's changing the position based on what I tell it to. You'll notice right here as well, we've got an X and a Y position. So you remember we learned graphing, and you've got your X position and you got your Y position. Okay, so if I change this to say 100, it's going to move further along. This is kind of like a graph, and I think the way this works, if I turn on, there's a way to turn on the grid somewhere. I don't know how to do it. Anyways, imagine that there is a line here, your y-axis and your x-axis, okay? And if I set this to 0 and 0, okay, that's sort of the center point. And if I change it, I remember graphing from like grade 5, right? If I change this to my x to 100, it's going to move over to the right, okay? And if I make it minus 100, it's going to move to the left because there's that grid there, okay? If I go here and I make this 100, it's going to move up. And if I change it down to negative 100, it's going to move down below my grid, which was here. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to set this to 0 and 0. Oops, 0. Okay, and now when I click this, it's going to move, and you'll see that it updates to 10. Every time I click this thing, it changes the X position because it's saying move this 10 steps. And if I make it 25 here, right now it's 20, I click on this thing and it changes it to 45. Okay, that should make perfect sense. If I went and grabbed, let's see, move. So this is changing steps. I'm going to put this back because I don't actually want this, and I'm going to go set X to. Actually, no. Let's go change X by. Okay, now that's similar, except this is explicitly setting X. So whatever X is right now, it's 70. I click this, it changes it to 80. If I go and get this here, and I go change Y by 10, I click this, it's going to go up 10. Okay. If I want to move it down, I just make it a negative. Okay, and then when I click it, it goes down by 10 every time. Okay. All right. So these are some of the things we can do, and there's a bunch here. You can see there's a turn 15 degrees. Okay, which I can then make 90 degrees if I want to, and it'll just turn 90s. Okay. Every time I click it, it does that. Now, if I do this, it's going to do both of these things. When I click this, because they're now connected, see how I take that and it kind of snaps into position there? If I click this, it'll run both of these as a block. So it's going to go 90 degrees, and it's going to move 10 over. I'm going to make this 25 just to make so you can see it. And I click here, so notice it's 80 and minus 70 with a direction of 180. I click this, it's going to change the direction. Okay, it rotated 90, and it actually moved over, right? So every time I do this, it like rotates off the screen. Okay, that makes sense, I think. Great. Now, if I did this, it's going to cancel out. These are going to cancel out because, actually, no, I guess it wouldn't. Let's see. There, it's also going down now. Okay, so it's doing all of these things every time I click on it. All right, so there's a bunch of these, and you can edit these to be whatever you want. I'll make that 25, and I'll make this 25, and that should be straightforward. The other thing I can do is I can say, grab this one here, point and direction, and if I click on this, it'll put it back to a 90 degree, okay, which is 90. Notice here that that's a 90, okay, that is 180 there, and then over to here, minus 90, and then what's that? That's 0. Okay, so those are the directions it's talking about. Okay, so if I change this to minus 90, okay, and I click on it, it's going to point it in, I don't know which way, there, that way. Okay. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. Put that back to 90. Click on this, sets them back to the original position. Okay, lots of things we can do. I can go to set this, set X and set Y, and say I set this to 0, and I set this to 0. No matter how many times I do this, when I click this, it sets my X back, and I click this, it sets my Y back. Okay, so these are all little code blocks, and each code block can do, it applies to the sprite that I've selected. Okay, so let's get rid of all these for now. And let's add a new sprite. I'm going to set this guy back to 90. And I'm going to put on, let's move over here. Okay, I'm going to grab a new sprite. I'm going to go down and find that cat. There he is. Okay, now we've got two versions of this. Notice that one is called cat and one is called sprite one. Let's call them orange cat. Notice I'm not putting a space between them. I'm calling them one word, orange cat, and when it's a new word, I'm using a capital C. Okay, so each new word I'm using a capital just to help differentiate it. I don't want any spaces in there. And this guy here is going to be called brown cat, because what I'm going to do is while I've got this guy selected, I'm going to go over here to costumes. And when I click on costumes, I can actually change this guy. So I'm going to go to my fill color. I'm going to drag this over here and make this a little bit more brown. And then I'm just going to, done that, go to this bucket tool. I'm going to fill him in, make him like a brown cat. Okay, there's our brown cat. And I'll go back to code, bring this guy over here. And notice now I'm editing this guy. Okay, so if I double click this, it's the orange cat. Double click this, it's a brown cat. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, while I'm on this thing here, I'm going to go, okay, that's going to move this guy and rotate this guy. And then when I double click this guy, whatever I put here, say I'm going to turn him the opposite way, and I'm going to change his Y direction. Okay, this is going to rotate this guy, and it's going to move him up in that direction. Okay, so these are motion tools. Now the other thing I can do, back to where they were, let's go 0, 0, and 90. Let's set this guy back to 90 here. Put him here. Okay. Notice that this thing is tied obviously to the X and Y position. When I change it, it updates here, right? Okay, so let's get rid of these guys again. Same thing with this, double click here and get rid of these guys. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add some control so that I can make this happen in certain series of steps. I don't know. Okay, so I'm gonna go and move this guy, and I'm gonna apply it to brown cat. Okay, I'm gonna make it, I don't know, 15. Actually, no, you know what? I'm gonna grab this one. I'm gonna go change X by 15. Okay, and as you know, that moves this. Okay, and I'm gonna go down now to my events, and there are a bunch of events here. We're gonna do a really simple one called when this sprite is clicked. I'm gonna drag that. I'm going to snap it here. Now these two things are connected. So when this sprite is clicked, change X by 15. So now what happens if I click on this, when I click on the sprite, it runs this thing. You can see it goes yellow for a quick second when it happens. Notice that that doesn't happen with this one. Okay, if I go motion and I go change X by 10, here it doesn't happen because I haven't added that. I haven't added this here when this sprite is clicked. Okay, this is the event handler. Okay, and so unless I add event handler to this one, it won't happen. It only happens when I click on this thing. Okay, and that's just telling me what happens with this piece of code. But that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is I want to have this move when I click on it. Okay, so let's add that. Events when this sprite is clicked. In fact, let's try a different one. Let's try it when space key is pressed. Like that. And I'm going to hit the space key. Okay, and that's moving this guy. Okay, and you can see that by choosing a drop down, I can change it to the right arrow or whatever, and now it moves with the right arrow. Okay, and space bar doesn't do anything anymore. Okay, so lots of ways to do that. To separate things, notice that if I pick up the top one, they don't separate, but if I pick up the bottom one, I can separate them. Let's say I change my mind. I'm like, I don't want to do that. Instead, I want to change the Y direction. I'm going to change my Y direction instead, and now when I hit the arrow key, it changes the Y direction. Okay, try that. I'm going to try and find some more tutorials, but this should get you started, and then I'll create a little tutorial for you guys to try and see what you can come up with. Okay, fingers crossed that all this works. The first challenge I think is going to be getting everyone on the class here in this thing. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully it works. Step 1 first, step 2 second. All right, fingers crossed. Hopefully this is good.